Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Pinnell. I'm the Membership and Database Officer at Tacoma Art Museum, and I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up today for our Zoom members program. I'd like to take a moment to recognize that Tacoma Art Museum sits on Puyallup tribal land. Without further ado, Jessica Wilks and Ellen So.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's kind of funny to be on Zoom, but glad to see all the smiling faces. Um, as Eric mentioned, I'm Jessica Wilks, and I'm the Associate Director of Curatorial and Head Registrar at Tacoma Art Museum. And I'm delighted to be joined by Elenito, Tacoma Art Museum's Collection Manager. Today, we are going to present on caring for your collections at home. And in doing so, we're going to ask that everybody be put their microphone on mute, which it looks like a lot of people have, so thank you. And we've reserved time at the end to have discussion or answer any questions that may come up during the PowerPoint. So as we get started, we're going to just briefly talk about our roles at Tacoma Art Museum. Ellen and I will both do that. And then I'm going to speak a little bit about the ways that we safeguard TAM'S collection and loans to the museum while they're on site at the museum. And then Ellen's going to follow up by giving some practical suggestions on how to employ preservation strategies at home. So we're going to kind of ping pong back and forth. So in my role as the head registrar at Tacoma Art Museum, I'm responsible for the care and safety of all the artwork in TAM'S possessions. That means the permanent collection and any loans to or from the museum. I take care of all the paperwork associated with the artworks, keep the records, do the insurance and shipping. And I also set the parameters for how we handle artwork and store artwork. Ellen, would you like to talk a little bit about?
Oh, I would love to talk about myself. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. I hope we give you some good, useful information. My name's Elenito. I'm the collections manager at Tacoma Art Museum, and Jessica and I work very closely together as our jobs are fairly intertwined, but I feel like maybe the easiest way to describe what I'm doing in relation to her job is my work deals physically with the artwork, directly with the artwork a lot. So I'm downstairs implementing some of the many strategies and policies that we have at the museum to take care of the collection. I do things like take care of our inventory, figure out where we're going to store things and things like that. And I do work to support our curators and our preparator as well.
Thank you, Ellen. All right, so we're just going to jump right into it. TAM employs a lot of preservation techniques, and there's a lot of different elements of storing and caring for art that we track very closely. One of the first things that we track really closely at the museum. Uh-oh. Sorry, my things aren't going forward. Oh, there we go. Is temperature and humidity. Temperature and humidity is really important in preserving artwork, and we strive to keep a very stable environment. For preservation environments, the ideal temperature range is 62 degrees to 72 degrees, and the ideal humidity levels are 45% to 55%. Of course, different artworks take different temperatures and humidities differently, but as a whole, these are the parameters in which we try to keep at the museum. Stability is key when we are talking about our collection. With humidity in the air, it has water. And so with a lot of the artworks are made of organic materials, and the structures look like this, where, sorry, it's in front of my face, where the fibers of whatever it is, could be paper or wood, look like this. And so when water is introduced to that material through humidity, it swells up like this. And then when the humidity level drops down, if it drops down too low, it goes like this and seizes up on itself. And so you can imagine that a kind of up and down temperature or humidity in a preservation environment could lead to a lot of damage. Some of the damage that can happen with this fluctuation is something that we call mechanical damage. You can see in the painting of the tree there on paper that the paper has expanded and contracted, and now it is severely cockled. The same process happens with paintings, and sometimes it is really disastrous because it makes paint pop off of canvases or wood, planks. The other thing that we see is with the mechanical damage is sculpture that are made out of wood. Sometimes they'll crack, and there's no real way to fix that crack without introducing more material. Another type of damage that we see often, well, we don't see it at the museum often, but what could happen is biological damage. With water and high temperatures, it is the perfect breeding ground for mold. And mold can destroy artwork so quickly, and it spreads so fast. And so we're always watching to make sure that mold is never present on anything that comes into the museum, and that mold doesn't develop in our environment. So we watch the humidity very closely, that it doesn't get over 60%. And finally, the other type of damage that we see is chemical reaction damage. Here you'll see a bronze sculpture of a little cat that has bronze disease really severely. And this is introduced from humidity. The water starts the chain reaction in the metals, and it just starts kind of eating away at it. And if it's not looked after and cared for and taken to a conservator, this is what could happen.
All right, here we go. So I just want to preface my parts of this presentation as being things that are, I think you're probably all going to be thinking like, okay, it's a lot of common sense. But I also want to preface it by saying that, of course, when we're at home, it's different from being in the museum. I want everybody to enjoy the artwork that they have and live your best life for you and for that artwork. And sometimes that just means, you know, we have to compromise a little bit. But these are just going to be suggestions to sort of just try and do the best we can for the artwork so that we have as much time as possible to live together and enjoy each other's company. So this is just a list of places that I'm sure you can guess in our homes have significant fluctuations on a day-to-day basis in temperature and humidity. So I rather threateningly call this higher risk areas to display art, but don't be afraid. You'll see a slide later that I'm complicit. So obviously in the kitchen, in the bathroom, near an often used outside door, maybe like the front door is kind of what I have in mind when I say that. Placing artwork close to windows that are often open or windows that have some of that terrific Pacific Northwest condensation. And of course, hanging artwork that's delicate on poorly insulated outside walls where the temperature is actually fluctuating against the wall. So yeah, not great, but so there are some artworks that are able to remain more stable than others in the environments that I just described. So glaze ceramics, glass sculptures, works on canvas. If possible, I would avoid, especially in the bathroom in particular, if you can avoid it, to avoid displaying works under glass. And the reason for that is when you've got glass over something, air isn't circulating. So once that moisture gets inside your framed work, it just really wants to hang out and just mold your stuff or cockle it like Jessica was describing. And the other thing, I don't know if any of you guys have like Rococo frames in your kitchen or bathroom, but gilt frames and leafing also respond. They're just really bummed out with humidity and temperature fluctuations because when the substrate contracts, like Jessica was describing, of course, because the leaf is just something that's brushed and glued onto the surface, it'll start to crack and do what we call lifting, which is basically just a fancy way we say flaking off. So not great. Okay, well, here we go. So this picture is my kitchen, like taken like 2 days ago in my very own kitchen. There it is. There is artwork hanging above my, you can't tell, above my stove next to a window. I'm not so sure about the insulation on that wall. So the reason I have it there is that I just super love it. I can see from this photo though that there's a little bit of caulking happening. So what are some of the things we can do to just stay on top of the condition of our artwork? Things that you probably already do anyway, just to maintain the condition of your home. So using air circulation frequently. So anytime you take a shower or whatnot, boil some water for tea. You want to pop on the exhaust fan and just let it go for a while until you feel like you can physically feel often like the decrease in the humidity. Visually inspecting the work, which I clearly should have done because I can see that cockling on my ankle flood poster. Periodically, you just want to, like you're standing there brushing your teeth or you're stirring your spaghetti sauce, just like kind of while you're zoning out, enjoying life, like just give a glance to your artwork and see what's happening. Sometimes when we look at things every day, like just sort of peripherally or walking by, like when you stop and really take a minute, you'll be able to notice where things are different. So you want to be looking for potentially discoloration from foxing, which is a type of molding, any changes in the surface, like I see that cockling at the top of the poster. So any change like that, then I would go to the next option, which is to try and limit display time. Take that artwork down and perhaps put something else there if you really see that it's getting damaged. And depending on the value of the work to you personally or the financial value of the work, you can go get it assessed or conserved if necessary. But those are, I think, the three easiest ways that we can all do to sort of keep our artwork in the best shape in those hot, wet, cold rooms.
Great, thank you, Ellen. The next thing that we track really, really closely is UV and light exposure. Not a lot of people know that light exposure and UV exposure is the #1 destroyer of artworks. At TAM, we've been lucky enough over the last 5 or so years to convert all of our lighting into LED lighting, which reduces the UV exposure component for us. So we're really lucky that way. We track light exposure with the light meter there, and we track it in foot candles, which is the measure of light's intensity. For works on paper, photographs, and textiles, or anything that's really sensitive or has like fugitive coloring or anything like that, we typically do not show it lit over 7-foot candles. We keep it between 5 and 7. For paintings on canvas, we typically keep it between 20 and 25-foot candles. And paintings on wood panel, we keep between 12 and 20. And usually we're really conservative with the light exposure because it is so harmful to artworks. Before I go to this slide, I just wanted to say that as an example, if you have something that's hung or it has direct sunlight hitting it, the foot candles can be upward of 3,000 to 5,000 foot candles. So you can kind of see the difference between what the museum, the conservative light levels that the museum upholds, and then how high they could get without even really realizing that it's damaging your artwork. Here are some examples of damage that can happen from light exposure and UV exposure over time. You'll see that light exposure dries out paper and starts breaking it down. I don't know if any of you have picked up a newspaper, an old newspaper, it just kind of shatters and falls from your hands. That's the same effect that it does on papers. Heavier weight papers take a little bit longer to break down in that way, but they certainly do. At the top, you'll see a print there that is discolored, it's yellowed, and around the edges where it's white, it shows that the glue that was holding it to a substrate has dried up and flaked away, so it has an effect on glue as well over time. So you'll see your artwork fall in its frame or out of its mat. It'll not look like it once did. I'm sure that paper was at one time bright white. The same goes for the drawing of the little boy. You can clearly see where the mat was covering part of the paper, and the really yellowed areas where the light hit or the light was exposed or the artwork was exposed. So at TAM, we have an exposure schedule. We limit the amount of light, obviously, that works of paper and other sensitive materials like textiles and prints and photographs can receive in the museum. Typically for, let's say, a Japanese wood block print like the one seen on the slide, we would never show it for more than 3 months of display. And then once it came off you, we would put it in deep, dark storage for up to 5 years. Because once artwork has been exposed to light or damaged by light, you can never go back. It's cumulative. So putting it away in storage helps prolong that artwork over time.
Oops. Okay. These are some more common sense things that I think everyone should consider in their home when they're hanging artwork, especially the sensitive artworks that Jessica's talking about, works on paper, textiles, older paintings. So you want to just pay attention in your own home. We're all aware of what the good sunny spot is. If we're not, all of our pets are acutely aware of where the good sunny spots are in our homes. So you want to sort of track that. And for me, I feel like I'm always learning as the seasons change which of my artworks in my own home I'm just frying to death. But there's only so many walls. But, you know, if work is particularly delicate, it's a great plan to just consider if you might be able to enjoy it on a wall that does not get direct sunlight. Lamps and overhead lighting are also something you want to be aware of. I often move lamps around when I realize that they're just shooting up the wall over my movie posters or something. And again, the vulnerability of the artwork, which I just mentioned, the type of artwork, you want to be mindful of what can be most vulnerable to light levels. While this may seem like a dark photograph of what appears to be a haunted Scandinavian modern Asian American living room, actually, that is what it is, except for the haunted part. This is my mother's living room, and that is an antique Japanese screen that she has been determined to destroy by hanging it on that wall. You can't tell in this photograph, but the son just loves that wall so much, as do those lamps. So this was taken at Christmas time, I hope, because there's a poinsettia and some weird red decorations. But what you see here is one of the versions of me making her cover her artwork because she doesn't want to take it down, but we've reached a compromise wherein it's covered for part of the year, just to try our best not to completely annihilate this thing, but still being able to enjoy it. So my mother's very patient, but she also just loves that screen to death. So there you go. So what can we do to sort of mitigate light damage, but we're still living in the world where there is a sun and windows and all those great things, lamps, etc. You can adjust window coverings in your home to sort of filter out light. You know, if you can just kind of compromise and do the half blind or partial, you know, when you walk in and the sun's beaming on the wall, if you don't mind, just like slide that curtain shut a little bit. It'll make a huge difference in the longevity of your artwork. If you're getting things framed, you can always get them, you can ask the framer if they have UV glazing, which comes in all types. You can get it on Plex, you can get it on glass. They can sometimes add something that's basically like a sticker on top of the framing that you already have, if that's your choice. Much like I made my mother's house look incredibly weird and tacky for 6 months out of the year, you have the option to cover the art. But ideally, and full disclosure, this is what we actually do now, is we rotate it out with other work. So there's another screen that she likes to fry that goes in that place for 6 months out of the year. And we rotate, just like Jessica's saying, 3 months on, 5 years off. In the Ito house, we just do the 6 months thing, and we play pretty loose. But it has absolutely made a difference in the vibrancy of the screens. And my mom still gets to enjoy them. So UV filters, this is something we do at the museum, and I don't expect everybody to be able to do this in their home. There's a lot of fluorescent lighting these days, but you can buy filters that go over the bulb safely and don't burn your house down, thank goodness. And it cuts out a lot of the UV from fluorescents, and fluorescents are just a major culprit. The sun and fluorescents, they seemingly hate artwork, but those are some of the options that we have. Oh, and this picture is actually in the museum last week. A couple months ago, we realized that even though we're not in the museum, light still happens periodically when people are checking on the artwork, and we still have light coming in some of the windows, very just not directly. But this is a picture from the WPA show we have up right now, and we went in and papered over all vulnerable artwork in the entire museum. So the piece that you cannot see, but hopefully we'll be able to see sometime soon, is work on paper. That's terrific. I won't ruin it for you.
Great. So we're going to talk a little bit about art movement. I wanted to share with you one of my most favorite stickers from a Japanese art handling company. Translates down there to handle carefully like a mother cat. I just think it's so cute. So in terms of thinking about moving artwork, we actually, Ellen and I think about moving artwork a lot because that is the majority of our job. We always have a game plan for where we're going with artwork, how we're going to get there, how many people it's going to take, because it takes all of us a lot of time to do it. This is your slide.
But you're doing great.
Okay, well,
it doesn't matter,
keep going,
right?
then.
Unless people want to vote. Just kidding. These are actually sort of adapted guidelines to how, as Jessica's saying, we are constantly moving art all over the place. And so these are just things to keep in mind. Again, it's a lot of common sense, but it's amazing. I don't know about if you guys ever pick something up to take it somewhere, and then you get there and you realize there's actually no place for me to set this down, and then I have to take it all the way back and put it down. I don't do that at the museum, thank goodness, because we follow these rules, but at home, apparently all bets are off. Anyways, so ideally, establish a clear path from A to B. If something is heavy or just feels a little delicate, you just feel nervous, of course, get an extra pair of hands if possible. Maybe right now, not the greatest time to do that, but if you have somebody already in your bubble with you, absolutely. We try to be mindful of where we grab and lift on artwork, particularly sculptures, or things that perhaps are in a delicate frame. You just want to assess the artwork before we pick it up, always. So we want to minimize the contact that we have moving the artwork. We just want to touch it as few times as humanly possible and still let it do its thing. So minimize the number of times that you're moving something all over the place, or just laying your hands on it. And with that in mind, just always want to have clean hands or wear gloves.
Do you want to talk a little bit about those pictures? Because they are incredible. Those are all works from our collection.
I can talk really fast about that. The one on the right is a piece by Sutton Barris Color, the convenience booth, and that is actually the artwork. We went with a bunch of people and the artists themselves, and it was rigged up. It actually had to go, I think, 2 stories down to the street on Lower Queen Anne. So we had to move it out onto the patio, rig it up to the crane, and then just watch it and get lowered down. So that's one of my favorite things.
Same.
We have that piece now at the museum. We're super lucky to have it, but that was kind of an exciting day for us. To the left of that is a sculpture, I believe it's the Panther, is that right? Mm-hmm. And that's something that it's from the Haub collection. And so again, it's all strapped down. We've got diapers, which we use a lot to pad and cushion artwork to keep it safe. And that's so the strapping won't abrade the stone there. And of course we pop it on a pallet jack, next step into the truck and back to TAM from Wyoming. On the cart there, we use those carts that are padded and double-sided to carry all kinds of artwork. And that is actually Marvin Oliver's Orca bin, is that the title? And that's the top piece, the glass piece, which is extremely heavy. And so we often just have to decide, like, what's the safest way to do it? Is it 6 people all carrying one cart? Or is it better for us to place it onto this cart and tie it down and just give it the least amount of touches, like we're saying? So Next one, some glass. For Patrick and me. It's the Zanfarico apple and the green gauge plum from our glass collection. And then peeping out of that box, I know it's Dante Marione's needle base, one of them. But so the cart says art only. Sure. But what you can see there, if you can look closely at the base of the apple, there are 2 little bags, and those are actually full of buckshot, and we use those to stabilize the artwork. Of course, the cart is padded, and when we are moving it, ideally, we'll have one gloved hand on the artwork, so it won't move around, and we just wheel that stuff all over the museum and put it where we need it.
Thanks, Ellen.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about artwork display. This is another topic that we think about a lot at the museum, and it translates to, thinking about showing your artwork at home as well. So at the museum, there are a couple things that we consider. Well, 5 things that we consider a lot. Number 1 is location. Where do we intend to put the artwork? Is it going to be covered in a case? Is it going to be safe from touching? Those are all things that we think through, and if the artwork is not going to be safe, we make accommodations or make some kind of display furniture that would help preserve that artwork. We also talk a lot about display conditions. For us, we always want to make sure that we're not displaying artwork too closely together, that there is a clear path between pedestals and the wall, things like that, so that people aren't bumping in or accidentally backing up into. We think a lot about how close artwork is hung at the end of a wall, because a lot of times we've found that when you're going upstairs or you're exiting a space, a lot of times people drag their shoulder along the wall. And so if there's an artwork there, it could damage it. So we think about that. We also think about how often we're going to have to move a piece of artwork. Say we install something in our lobby space where we have weddings and events and all kinds of fun things. We want to make sure that we are not displaying artwork there that is super fragile or hard to take down, or that can be damaged easily. We are also in an earthquake zone. All of us know that, but for us, that means that we cannot leave artwork just displayed on a pedestal and walk away. We always have to secure it in some way, and so we use museum wax or museum putty for glass artworks. We always have tethers or straps or something like that keeps artwork safe when they're on display. For artworks that are installed on the wall, we have specialized Florite clips that we'll share with you as well. And then lastly, well, not lastly, most importantly, we think about fragility of an object. Is the thing flaking or prone to breaking, or there are just things that don't do as well as others when they're out on display. Inevitably, people touch, and so we think a lot about what people touch and why people touch and things like that. And lastly, the other consideration we look at is value. So if we've got something that's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, we're not going to put it in the lobby where there's no protection from events and things like that. So we take that into consideration very highly. All of those elements can be thought through for your artwork at home as well. If you have something like your grandmother's vase that has these ornate handles or something like that, you may not want to put that on your entry table as you're walking in with no museum wax or something like that. You wouldn't want to knock it over. You wouldn't want to break it because you can't replace it. Sometimes you can fix it, but when you have things fixed, it's never the same after getting it fixed. So. Sorry, that was a little bit of a downer, but it's true.
I'm really worried about Grandma's vase now, Jess. What's going to happen? Move it. This is you.
Oh, the next thing that we think a lot about is storage conditions. And so you'll see some of Ellen's beautiful, beautiful handiwork here. On the left, I'm showing our compact storage system that we have. Basically, it looks like those big cabinets that you see at the doctor's office with all the medical files in it. It's got a crank that moves the shelves on a track. And so in doing so, or in having this kind of system, we have to make sure that we buckle everything down. You'll see that on the sculpture of the standing man, there's a rope. He's securely tied down. Everything has a mount or is secured to the shelving. That's part of looking after, earthquakes and, bumps and things like that. Inevitably things happen. And so we're always trying to think 2 steps ahead and prevent those things from happening. Storage conditions, here we look at the temperature and humidity like we talked about earlier, the lighting. We look at, we track for pests, bugs, things like that. We never put artwork on the floor, just standing on the floor, because we wouldn't want to leave it there and then have a water incident and have something get wet. So you'll always see things chalked up onto blocks in our storage. On the right, you'll see our painting storage racks. And it looks like those are the racks that hold our Impressionism collection. You see from all the gold frames. We allow space around each object so that when we're taking them off, that we're not bumping those fragile gilt frames like Ellen mentioned earlier together and chipping them or having to handle things too much. Here's some of our shelving. Ellen makes all the custom custom housing that you see there. So in the picture on the far left, you'll see on the lower shelves there's a glass artwork, and basically it is a cube of glass that has a sphere in the inside, and so they're like sections of the sphere all come together to make it a cube, which is maybe a little confusing how I described it, but very beautiful. But in storing that stuff, we can't just store it with all the glass components together, because if we have an earthquake or somebody bumps it, there's this. And so glass on glass always breaks. So Ellen figured out a way to individually package each one of these pieces so that we can still see them, we can still track the condition and know that they're there, but they're securely lying there on the shelves and protected from any kind of event that might happen. In the center photo, you'll see the same kind of strategies employed. You'll see the ropes holding the sculpture up at the top. You'll see the components of a very large sculpture that are red and blue in the background there. And we store a lot of the glass that we have at TAM boxed up because it's just easier for us to move. And we have a whole lot of it. So it allows us to be more modular in our approach. And then the last photo there is one of my favorite packing jobs. This ceramic piece is really kind of difficult to think about. How do you store it and how do you take care of it? Because it's such an odd shape and it's such a fragile material. And so here the packing that Ellen came up with is a guillotine kind of solution where the front of the foam that you see around the center slides off so that we can safely slide that piece of artwork out of the box. It's genius. Ellen's a genius. We also, in thinking through our storage conditions and where to store art, we have limited storage space, so we store everywhere we can. And so pieces of artworks like this one you see here, it's part of a
It's part of John Buck's
John
Dragon
Buck.
House.
Sorry, I was going to say Buck, but John Buck. It's one component of a larger sculpture, but it's such an odd shape. And the lines that you see scribed on the front of it are in like a chalk-like material. So it's just fragile and cannot easily be slid in between cardboard or something like that. And so Ellen again came up with this idea of hanging it up on the wall with some specialized straps and diapers again, just to protect it and to get it out of the way.
Okay. Just to be clear, some other people have also made some of those
But you
storage
do the
things,
majority
but
of
it
it.
is part of my job. Yeah. And it's part of both our jobs to consider the artwork and all the different ways and things we have to consider in order to store it safely. So storing it at home, again, it's kind of a cumulative thing based on all the other information that we've been presenting to today about the museum and how we implement those things at home. Much like for displaying your artwork, you want to store artwork in areas where you can find the most consistent temperature and humidity. So unfortunately, it seems like that list just means you have to avoid every place you would actually want to store things in your home. But if you can, please avoid garages, porches, uninsulated attics, all those kinds of spaces. Every place that you go in the summer and you're like, my gosh, it's so hot, I want to die. Or, it's really freezing when I went out to get that thing in the garage. Don't put artwork there if you absolutely can. Like Jessica was saying about how we keep things in the museum, try not to store things directly onto the floor. And sometimes that's as simple as just a couple chunks of 2x4 on the floor. Put your box on top of that. Just anything that you don't want bugs to get into, that you don't want water seepage, or even just the dampness of a floor in a basement, or again, a garage. Just something to think about. Don't put it on the floor. It's a great plan. For framed artwork, we want to store things oriented, and by that I mean we always want to store our artwork in the manner in which it is displayed if possible. And more specifically, we try to do that for framed work and paintings. So we want them to be oriented the way that we would show them and upright. So much like I think you can think of it in terms of how you might store vinyl records at home, or even like treasured books. You just want to keep things just standing at attention, upright, and just absolutely the way that you would take them out and look at them. So it's a great way to think about that. Easy access, that's important just because everyone has, maybe not everyone, I'm really projecting you guys, everyone has a closet at home where it's just like, oh wow, the picture down there isn't my closet, that's at the museum. But, where you have to take a million things out to get to something. If it's possible and you have the space, try and make, in particular, delicate work easy to access. And the reason I say that is not just for the convenience, like you're just snapping up the artwork and throwing it here and there up on the wall. The reason I say that is because often you don't want to take a box down and tip it. Just consider how you're going to be putting things away and taking them down. It's really helpful to keep the condition of the artwork safe and stable. And label things clearly. That way you're not moving all these boxes that ultimately you're like, oops, what was that sound? And you're like, oh, I'll bring up grandma's face that Jess is worried about. Oh no, that box
really
had
worried
grandma's
about it.
face in it. If only I had labeled it. I had only just taken it off of that entryway table too. Yeah. So good practical advice. Again, very much common sense. This picture down below that is most definitely not my closet is actually the boxes that the Chihuly floats are stored in. And so that's in our freight elevator as we prepare our annual display of those. And so you can see they've all got the letters on them that tell us who's who. We've got pictures on all of them. I guess they're sitting on the floor. Oh well.
But it's very briefly.
Okay, packing artwork for storage. I'm gonna go really quick because I don't know what time it is. All right, quick. For the oriented upright artwork, use clean cardboard if you have it to pad between your two-dimensional artwork. One of the reasons we do that is because if you have hanging hardware on the back and you put it right up against something else, you're going to damage that other something else. So cardboard boxes, anything like that, that is just meant to be a cushion. And so that then when you're moving things, it's not just crashing against each other. It's just a great way to help keep the work upright and to keep it safe. We always use larger boxes. One of the things I do for my job is when we go pick up artwork off site is that I spec it out. And when I say I spec it out, it means that I have to look sometimes at just pictures of artwork without a lot of information. And then I close my eyes and throw a dart to order supplies. But
no, you don't.
Sometimes we do.
It's a lot of measuring.
We don't know. But so basically, I just always round up, and there's a certain formula that we use and apply it to any dimensions, just to make sure that we have enough space to safely pad around the work. If we're putting foam chunks in to keep it from moving back and forth, we want to have room for that. We always want to have something on the bottom, and potentially, depending on the nature of the artwork, something on top. And so you always want to you don't want a box that's like, that's a perfect fit, that's really snug. That's terrible, you guys. So try to go bigger is better with boxes. For bubble wrap, here's the hot tip. I was going to put pictures of some of this damage, but I didn't because it just horrifies me to no end. When you're using bubble wrap directly on artwork, even just framed artwork, bubbles facing out. I know it's easier to tape it up when you've got that beautiful smooth surface, but for the interior surface that's touching the actual artwork, always have the bubbles facing out. And what that damage looks like, I don't know if there's a fancy name for it. I'm sure there is, besides my nightmare, which is the name I have for it. You'll see that if it's stored that way long enough with the bubbles up against it, as the plastic degrades or sometimes reacts with the surface of the artwork, you'll end up with this terrible visual reminder and sometimes an actual surface damage that lets you know and lets everybody else know forever that you wrapped it bubbles in.
And you can't fix it.
Can't fix it. So easy. This is one of my favorite things that we do. We haven't always done it this way, but I love it. Maybe people already know this everywhere, and I'm the last to come to the party. But if you have peanuts, we bag them because when we've got glass and other vessels, the peanuts want to go into every crevice ever. And then we don't want to damage the artwork by reaching in all the way up to our shoulder and fishing peanuts out or having to tip artwork to try and pour it. And you know, they always just have those staticky little things. So what we do when we do use peanuts, and we do sometimes, is that we'll put them into soft plastic bags and just make very loose pillows, for lack of a better way to describe it. So you want to leave a lot of extra room in the bag so that the peanuts can move around, and that way they can mold very gently around your wrapped artwork. And so that's a hot tip. Then you don't open your box and peanuts go everywhere. So storing, there you go. Ooh, lightning round. So how are we doing on time? Should we stop for questions or do people want lightning round? Anybody? Eric? Okay. Lightning round. How do I store my works on paper? Acid-free everything. And mylar sleeves and envelopes are also an option. For works on paper, we want to store things flat. Sometimes the works are so large that we are tempted to roll them, or if things come already rolled, sometimes you got to leave them rolled. But ideally, if work is manageable and you have enough room to store them flat, store them flat. And so unlike how I just told you the opposite of having things upright, I'm talking about unframed, loose works on paper, photographs, things like that. So ideally they're flat in a drawer or a box, ideally an acid-free box. You want to, wherever possible, remove things that you care about from acidic backings and mats. So if it's possible to just unframe something and take that mat that looks very suspicious to you off, take it off by all means. And if possible, replace it with acid-free things or just store it without those backings. They will absolutely eat up the paper and damage your artwork. Again, we keep saying this, avoid humid and high temperature storage areas. The key is stability, as Jessica says, and wherever possible, limit exposure to pollutants. So again, I know I seem like I'm really lobbying against garages, but no. You want to do it?
Sure, I'll do the next lightning round here. This is one of the most frequently asked questions when people call me or Ellen on the phone about their personal collections, and it's how to store my textiles. And a lot of times people are talking about my great-great-great-grandma's christening dress from, 1814 or something like that. And so here are some of the techniques that we employ at the museum.
I'll explain this first one
Okay.
because I made this slide and I'm just throwing Jessica into it. Textiles are like people. When I say that, I mean one of the ways to gauge if your textiles are digging it is if you're comfortable temperature-wise, humidity-wise, your textiles will also be feeling really good about that environment. So that's just one way to plant it in your mind. Like, am I comfortable in this space, in this storage space, in this room? Your textiles are going to be way happier there also. Okay.
Great. So whenever possible, store your textiles rolled and not folded. When we fold, it over time breaks the fibers of the fabric, and then you'll start seeing holes and weird fold marks and stuff that you won't be able to remove. A lot of times we wrap in clean, undyed muslin or cotton. You could do sheets or make bags out of the sheets. You can buy undyed muslin and cotton like at Joann's, places like that. It helps to protect the garment or the textile or the rug or whatever you are storing from becoming dirty, and just all around helps to store it. We often avoid plastic because there's no real air circulation. We want the textile to be able to breathe, and like in the next point, allow for air circulation in your space. We don't pack tightly or crowd, so you can't KonMari method your favorite textiles into those little squares. You got to let them take up the space that they need and to breathe. And then if you have textiles that absolutely need to be folded in some way, get some acid-free tissue and make scrunched up rolls of the tissue and put it where the fold would be. This helps eliminate the real sharp fold that you would get from just a normal fold, and it combats that breakdown of the fibers of the fabric so that you don't get holes.
And then one additional thing I realized that isn't on here is I think with, you know, your winter sweaters and coats and things like that, they're always like clean it before you store it. Of course, with textiles that are antiques or that we're not certain of exactly how they're made or they're in very fragile condition, don't clean it. Don't clean it. The best approach with very delicate or antique textiles, if you don't have an expert who can assess it for you, is absolutely just to do your best to maintain the condition that it's in. So we just want to do things that make it so it won't get dirtier or more stained, but often more damage gets done by using soap and water or dry cleaning or anything, any kind of solvents or anything onto that textile. It's a swan song, you guys. Oh, the formula. Well, we should stop because I think we're like going on endlessly. If people have questions, we can stop now and do that. Does Eric, do you want to, what's happening?
Yeah, go ahead. You can ask questions.
This topic is of interest to me. How to hang my artwork in the house?
I have a question. I don't know what, I should physically raise my hand or what?
I don't know. I don't know either. It's so weird. It's so
I
weird.
lost my audio.
You can go ahead.
Ooh.
We hear you, Frank. I don't know if you hear us, but we hear you.
My audio's back. Sorry about that. Obviously, we live in the Pacific Northwest, and most homes are not air conditioned. So maintaining regular temperature is very difficult, and humidity. What is, if you had to pick between a place that might occasionally get too cold or a place that might occasionally get too hot, which would you prefer for storing, say, a painting of some kind?
Do you want to answer? You want me to?
Ooh. Well, whoops. Paper likes it colder.
Okay.
So if that helps, like if you have a painting that's a little bit older, sometimes that mirrors those conditions. For me, I would always opt for colder. I don't know, Jess, you might say something different, in which case we're not helping you at all, Frank. We're just not helping you at all.
No, I agree with Ellen that find a spot that's a little cooler than hotter, I have gone to many donors and artists' houses, and I always love to see artwork come out of closets because it's dark in there. It's not often accessed. You know, if you have a closet that you can outfit to take your upright paintings or, you know, store on shelves in there, that is key. We've also seen like big artwork stored under beds. And I know
Great,
that we talked
actually.
about not storing on the floor, but that is, when we say that, we're talking about places where water damage could happen. And I know for a lot of people, water doesn't usually seep into your bedroom. It's more around the kitchen and bathrooms and downstairs kind of areas.
We hope.
So, you know, storing something flat under your bed is also a good place.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that helpful? So I know somebody was saying they're interested in some of the tenants around display. Is that was I hearing that right?
Yeah, so someone will ask you.
Okay, who is it?
I think
Ask me.
And this is Gwen, and I have a very large painting that I would like to hang in the living room, and I have lath and plaster walls, and it's very heavy, and so this formula thing that you are showing right now is of interest to me.
Okay, so the formula, there's two things I would recommend with plaster and lath walls, which of course are so common. This formula is actually the reason why people are often like, oh, when I go into the museum, the artwork looks so nice. And when I look at home, it just doesn't have that same, whatever that is, that pop. And what the formula does is it basically helps us hang things at what we would refer to as gallery height. So when things are hung on the line, it means that the midpoint of the artwork itself is between 57 and 60 inches typically. Sometimes we'll go 56, sometimes we'll go a little higher. You have to, at home, you have to adjust to the height of your ceiling and the size of your work. It sounds like your work is large, so you might not have to worry about your midpoint there. But this formula, which Jess and I are happy to give Eric all of these slides, and this formula, you can also probably Google it up. So you measure the artwork. So I have weirdly, I have something here. It's like a cooking show. Like I just take the lasagna out of the oven and it's done. But so, okay, I'm gonna stand up. Don't be alarmed, I'm not wearing sweatpants. So the formula, we wanna measure the height of the artwork. Whoops. So this is 11 inches. I divide that in half and I get 5.5. And then here's the part that makes it seemingly more complicated, but that makes total sense. And so this is actually just kind of like a weird little frame you would put a diploma in or something. And so you measure down to the hanging point. So I don't know if people can see this very well, but there's just this little tab thing that pops out, little tab. And so I go to the spot where the nail would touch, I measure down, it's 1.5 inches. So I take half of the height, 5.5, I add 1.5 to that to get 7, math. And then if I want to hang it at a 60-inch midpoint, I know that I need to hang at 67 inches. That's where I put my hardware. And when I put that thing on the wall, perfect gallery height. It's gonna look amazing. But for Gwen, what you're saying about having a heavy painting and plaster and lath walls, there are special just reference florites, and that's the hanging implement that we use at the museum. And they are the most amazing things ever because physics. So we have florites that there's a scale of how much weight they can bear. And that's what I would recommend that you investigate. We're happy, if you want to email Jessica or I or our preparer Ben, we'd be happy to point you towards a place to get those hanging hardware.
I put it on the resources list that you guys will receive after the talk.
Great. So if you can find a stud, please find a stud. But florites, like they really work. I can't explain it. There's a triple, what's the weight bearing for a triple floret?
It's 75 pounds per floret. So a lot of times things that you're hanging, unless it's a really heavy mirror or something, are not usually more than 150 pounds. So they work beautifully and cause limited damage to your walls. Ooh, Ellen's got a box of them.
My house, you guys. I know, this is what I use when I hang artwork in my kitchen to slowly damage it, against my own advice. So this is what we're talking about when we say a floret. It's these things, so it's just sort of a fancier, and I'm guessing way more expensive. I know it's way more expensive than the picture hangers that you see at the hardware store, but this one also has a clip. And Jessica was talking about that. That's an earthquake clip. And so it's meant to keep the artwork on the wall until the earthquake's strong enough to pull the nail out of the wall and we all die. But whatever. So this one, is this one 75? I think it's more, 75 each?
75, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so things like that. So we're happy to hook you up with those resources. And of course, if you have any questions for any of us about, if you're feeling nervous about hanging a heavy work, we certainly understand. And we're happy to walk you through it and help you out for sure. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Of course, it's our pleasure.
Are there any other questions?
Way back at the beginning, this is Gwen again, I missed a point on the canvas. It was 5 to 7 foot candles for paper. What was it for canvas?
Here, let me go back. Usually we do 20 to 25 for works on canvas. And it's really important when we start thinking about artwork that's on canvas, you have to think about the material that is the most susceptible to light on canvas. So sometimes there's mixed media works, which will have a piece of paper or some kind of a different types of things adhered to a canvas. You would want to use the foot candles for the thing that's the most sensitive. If it's just a straight up painting on canvas, say it's acrylic on canvas or oil on canvas, then 20 to 25 foot candles is perfect.
And of course, that's the museum ideal. I don't know how well that translates into a normal home, but there are also fun things if you really want to get into it. And I'm excited that you're just so invested in taking care of your art. That really makes us feel good.
Yeah.
There are strips of dyed fabric that we use at the museum to measure light damage, and those are really handy, potentially horrifying, but it also just keeps us mindful of what we're doing when we have new wings with glass on the end of it and things like that. We're just very interested in monitoring things really closely. So of course, I want to emphasize we want you to take care of your artwork so that you can enjoy it longer, but the key there, of course, is to enjoy it. So.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What's the most challenging work of art you've had to install?
Ooh, good question.
Of our own or of somebody else's?
Up to you.
Oh, up to us.
Oh gosh.
I think I'll answer one that I thought was difficult, and then Ellen, if you have one that's different, then
I might.
A couple years back, we did an exhibition of Paul Stephen Benjamin's work. It was an installation of, I think, it was like 50 or 60 large televisions that were stacked on top of each other all the way to our ceiling, which is about 20 or 30 feet tall. It was really huge, but as you can imagine, the TVs weighed exorbitant amounts of weights because they were the old tube type TVs. So our preparator, Ben, and his team had to figure out a rigging system to be able to lift the TVs up onto a substructure that they built, but they also had to make that substructure invisible to the visitors' eyes. So there was a lot of trying to figure out what would go where, a lot of grunting as we picked up those large TVs. We also had to source the TVs locally. It wasn't an artwork that just came to us. We had to put out things on Craigslist saying we're looking for these specific TVs, and we went all over creation picking them up. So it was, in my mind, a challenging one, but super fun installation too. I think Ellen can attest to this. We love installing artworks that challenge us. And when the overall, when it's all put in and it's amazing, there's such a sense of pride that we were able to do it and that it looks so good.
Okay. My gosh, we could talk for hours, I think, because I'm trying to flip through my mind about the artwork. There's so many different ones. For 30 Americans, I think there was some fantastic contemporary artwork that I don't want to say it was challenging. I'll say that, like, to me, it's about it just being different from the usual painting on the wall situation. For me, I love approaching things like that and, you know, assessing and problem solving. And it's great to unite with colleagues and put together something that just really is spectacular. So 30 Americans, there's two pieces that come to mind right away. There was a bale of cotton that was it was made of multiple bales of cotton that stacked. And that was, I feel like I've never sweat more in the museum. That's pretty gross. Oh, that's not true. When we filled the museum with rocks for that Zealand thing, I was hosing down rocks in our parking lot for a week. And then we shoveled them all into the museum.
Yeah.
So a lot of things like that. I'll say one thing that I loved installing, and the reason I installed it was because none of my colleagues wanted anything to do with it at the time, which is not a statement about the work so much as it is about what the work is made of. And that's a piece by the artist Maurizio Catalan, and it's a piece called Good Boy. And it is a beautiful 60s chair and a taxidermy dog just curled up as if it is sleeping. And I love that artwork. We opened the box and there was Good Boy at the bottom of the box, beautifully packed. And everybody just took a step back except me. So I reached in, they set the chair, and I put that boy on the chair. And I have to say, it gave me a feeling of connectivity to artwork that I had not had before in terms of other people's work and installing it, and that I haven't had since. Dead dog, who knew?
Thanks, y'all.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Mark. I had a question on the light exposure for well, what would you recommend, or is there a brand or a style or a type of foot candle meter to go buy?
Yeah, unfortunately, they're kind of expensive. The model that I showed in my slide, let me see if I can go back to it, will run you about $350. There it is there. But what we've seen with the advent of smartphones is that there are apps out there that will help you measure foot candles or lux levels for artwork. And so it's kind of a crude way to do it, but it totally works, and it gives you an idea of how strong the light is, and give you an idea if you want to move it or you know, limit the light exposure or cover it. It's a good way to gauge what you've got going on in your home.
And again, another cheaper way potentially to monitor that's a little more old school is the strips that we were talking about, which is the dyed fabric, and you set it out and then you just monitor it and you watch the fabric fade. And the fabric is, they know exactly how much light it takes to have a certain look. So you put it up, you let it just hang out in the sun, and then you compare it to another piece and it'll tell you about that. It'll give you an average of the light exposure. Those are, much like many of the supplies we have, bizarrely expensive for what we suspect it might be, but it's not $350. So another option.
I can add an app or two to the supply list along with the blue wool light indicators that Ellen's been talking about as well, just so that you can see what those things are.
No, that'd be great. Thank you. And
yeah,
in your opinion, the apps are accurate enough to give a reasonable indication on, are you good or bad?
Yeah,
Oh,
in fact, sometimes when I'm up in the galleries, maybe I shouldn't say this, but sometimes when I'm up in the galleries, I will whip out my smartphone because it's always with me, and I can check a light level if I think it's too hot, and then I'll follow up with our PV, light level meter just to confirm it. But yeah, typically it's been pretty close within a foot candle or so.
that's pretty
Okay.
good. Well,
Excellent.
Frank's on
Yeah,
it.
that's great.
Frank's saying there's some on Android that he's already
Oh, good.
found. And just a warning, it's going to really freak you out when you see how many foot candles it is. But again, like what we're showing you is absolutely the ultimate best practice. And, we just have to aspire to do that. But at home, it's a whole nother world.
It's a balance between enjoying the artwork in the place where you see it and protecting the artwork.
Absolutely. Ask my mom how much she loves to look at those Japanese screens. It's a decision that you have to make. And so we're just hoping we can provide you with just some tips just to be more mindful, I think, because if there is something that you're really worried about or something that, is super sentimental or has fiscal value, like it's good to just know what you're dealing with because there are a lot of ways to make choices in the average home.
And these tips that we're giving are preservation tips. And so if you have artwork and you find that over time that something's happened to it, it's not looking just the way that you wanted to, there's always conservators that can help you out with that and help you clean something or straighten something out. We are employing these preservation techniques at the museum to avoid having to do conservation and to keep artwork in the original, as close to the original condition as we can. It's
a losing bet.
It's a losing battle, yeah.
But much like life, it is the wabi-sabi of it all. Evolving from something, devolving towards nothing. Please just enjoy your art and objects.
And buy art.
And buy art.
Yeah. All right, is there any more questions? Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It's been really fun, and it was a little nerve-wracking to do it over Zoom, but we hope to see you in the museum when we open back up. It surely is coming soon as we start working our way towards stage 3 here in Tacoma. Please feel free to give Ellen and I a call or an email if any questions come up. We're always happy to help, and we're always a resource for the community. All right. See you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Hey, Jess
everybody.
and Ellen.
Thanks.
Great job.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Jess.
No, thank you for inviting us to do it. It was fun, and hopefully it wasn't too nerve-wracking for everyone.
No, it wasn't. It was bad. Awesome.
Hi, Dad. Thanks for coming.
Hi, sweetie.
Oh, I can't hear
you
you.
hear me?
I'll call you after this.
Okay,
Okay, bye.
bye.
Gwen, thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. And please give us a call if you need any assistance with hanging or have any questions or anything like that. We're happy to help.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you later.